Dear audience friends, welcome to my channel. Don't forget to subscribe and like. Let's get started.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Narrative Relationship. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Now, let's get into today's story video. I caught my cheating wife in the arms of her lover in the cab of a construction crane. Today, I have an interesting story to share with you. The huge shipyard seemed to live apart from the city, like a city itself, mysterious and hidden from people's eyes. There were many people living and working in the shipyard, up to 10,000. The factory employed people of various professions, and among them, special attention was paid to crane operators and slingers. Among those slingers was a young muscular man with a long stubby face and black hair, and his name was James Monta. Yes, he had the strength, but not the brains, otherwise, he would have quit slinging and found a better paying job a long time ago. Alas, the shipyard manager was a miser and paid little to the common laborers. Also working directly at the slipway was Elena Hood. Her job was to operate a crane. The crane itself was a huge steel gantry capable of lifting loads up to 5,000 tons. The interaction between the slinger and the crane operator was the key to safety in the company. Max Wood, Elena's husband, was in charge of the yard. Max and Elena did not meet here, not at the shipyard. One day, she was strolling along the quay near the harbor where the shipyard was located, while he was fishing. Max had just taken a caught Christian and was about to cast his line again, but he pulled the line too far back and the hook got caught on Elena's blouse. "Watch out," the lady snarled. "My bad," said Max, his voice crumpled. "I have a hole in my blouse now, you idiot. Is there anything I can do for you?" "What?" Elena looked at Max with contempt. "Well, let's go to a restaurant, for example." A shadow of doubt flashed across Elena's face. "Well, I don't know," said the lady, fixing her hair on her head. "You think about it." Elena didn't think for long. In a few seconds, she agreed. Max took her to an expensive restaurant. They told each other about themselves. He said his name, Elena said her name. Only her last name was still, of course, not yet Hood, but another. She said that she drove a gantry crane in the shipyard, in a covered workshop where they prepared the ship for ships. They exchanged phone numbers and started dating, and eventually, they got married. Elena took her husband's surname right after this wedding. Max asked his wife, "Do you want to work on a slipway under your supervision?" Elena dismissed it. However, Max caught the interest in her voice. "And why not?" "Better pay. You will not sling, and the crane operators are paid a lot. But there is one thing. You have to take a retraining course, because our cranes are much bigger than the ones you had in the indoor shop." Elena agreed. It took her some time to get trained, and she started working directly at the slipway. The marriage was strong and lasted 5 years. Then the shipyard got the slinger Monta. Max was of a different physique, chubby with bald spots and a bit of a limp. Several times, Max had noticed Elena looking at this change with interest, but he hadn't paid proper attention. She wouldn't go out with some pendulous slinger, Max thought, and he began to live his life as before. At home, Max did not notice any oddities in his conversations with his wife either. That's all right. There's nothing to be fooled about, he decided. This went on for several months. In the meantime, a large ocean tanker was being built in the shipyard, and so it came to the preparation for installation of the first diesel engine. According to the project, there should be 2 of them on the vessel. Max had access to CCTV cameras on the slipway and occasionally looked at how people were working and whether they were on schedule. On that day, preparations for the installation of the first engine were due to start at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but the crane did not move, and there was no slinger. The other workers had already brought the platform with the necessary equipment. All that was left was to wait for a command from their superiors. Max gave the command, but the work did not move from the dead point. They waited for an hour and a half. People began to come up to the slipway, and everyone was curious about what had happened. Then Max decided to go to the slipway himself. "I understand the slinger still hasn't arrived, right?" he asked the staff who had brought up the equipment. "No," the young fellow and apprenticeship student answered. Then Max looked at the crane itself. It was almost 40 meters high, and at the very top, he could see the glass operator's cabin. Well, all right, Max thought. I better get going. He climbed up on the crane, even though he had been terribly afraid of heights since he was a little boy. When he reached the top, his whole body was trembling with fear, and he was not happy about the wonderful view of the harbor and the city. Some strange feeling of freedom, all these sensations were interrupted by a wild fear of heights, a fear of crashing and crashing to hell. Overcoming this fear, Max moved towards the operator's cabin. When he reached an entity at the top, he was dumbfounded. Elena and Monta were engaged in their own thing. "So, you were staring at this fall, for a reason," Max barked. Then he looked at Monta. "Hey, get off my wife." "I can't," said James, ashamed. "Then I'll help you, you freak." And Max was about to pull James away from Elena, but she shouted, "No, don't do that. He really can't get away from me. I have a cramp." Elena's voice faded. "What do you have?" Well, what do you have?" Max yelled. "I have a cramp, and I can't let go of James." And that's when Max realized what an idiotic situation his wife and her lover were in, and Max burst into laughter. The man sat down on the floor, nestled with the back of his head against the cold steel wall of the cabin. Alas, the comfort in the cabin was minimal and started laughing like a horse, while Max laughed. Elena and James almost burned with embarrassment. They wanted to fall through the ground, to jump off a crane and crash to their deaths, to hang themselves, and so on, but they could not budge because, alas, Elena's cramp made them cling together tightly. Finally, Max calmed down and sent a medical team to the slipway immediately. He looked at his wife and her lover. "Only do not tell anything to anybody," Elena pathetically asked. "Not to tell," chuckled Max. "Okay, I won't tell." And he took his smartphone out of his pocket, smiled, and took a picture of the unlucky couple. "Will this go on the internet?" James asked dolefully. "What do you think?" Max said with a sneer. "On the internet, of course. It's not a scene to go to waste, is it? But it's a humiliation." "It's a mean thing," said Elena pathetically. "Isn't it a mean thing to do with some random guy on top while your husband is out of sight?" "Well, honey, there's a price to pay." Max turned a snide glance at James. "And you, my friend, are going to pay for all this." "Do I have to?" the man asked quietly. "My parents are rich. They will pay you as much as your soul desires." Max grinned. "Look, man, not everything in this world is measured in money. This may be a revelation to you, but it's a fact I've known since I was a kid. So let your parents spend their money to launder their name from disgrace and save their company." James opened his eyes wide. "How do you know about the company?" "Oh, I got conned there once." James's parents owned a chain of petrol stations across the country. At first, their fuel was really good, but as time went on, the quality started to drop. So one day, Max was driving home from another shipyard. He miscalculated the distance and did not notice in time that he was low on gasoline. Then, as if he had been saved a month, his gas station loomed up ahead. Max rejoiced and filled up there. On the way into town, the engine stalled and would not start again. Eventually, it turned out that water had been put in the petrol. At the time, Max didn't get involved with the crooks and he reacted indifferently to James when he showed up at the plant. Although Max immediately scouted out who he was. And then it was time not only to embarrass James himself, but also to finally shut down his parents' gas station chain. Max immediately posted a picture of James and Elena on the internet, detailing the situation below the photo. And then he added about the month of senior scans to a gas station scams. That's when the medics entered the cabin. Of course, their medical etiquette prevented them from laughing out loud at what they saw, but it was clear from their faces that it was hard to contain their laughter. James and Elena were covered with a blanket and with great difficulty brought down to the ground. And then there was the hospital, some doctor activity, and the next day, James and Elena were already out on their own. But what is the next day? It's about 12, maybe a little more hours from the time Max took the photo and posted it on the internet. And beneath that photo were immediately dozens of comments and reposts from car owners who have also been duped at Monta's petrol stations. Monta himself remained unperturbed the next day, but apparently it was only on the outside that he appeared so. Inside, he was clearly very depressed and he wanted to get himself killed. "How do you do?" Max asked him snidely. He came out of his office on purpose. James looked at him with hatred and hissed through his teeth. "We've had house searches, personal messages full of humiliation and threats, hate coming from everywhere. And Elena complained to me that everyone was laughing at her too." "I'm glad people like my picture," Max said slyly. "I hope your parents go to jail. And you, by the way, are fined for disrupting the schedule and heavily reprimanded because of you. The company had to do the preparatory work for the installation of the first engine at night. The other slinger and the other crane operator had to work overtime, but the tanker is on schedule, isn't it?" Trying to divert attention from his embarrassment, James asked, "On schedule, and today we are installing the engine itself. Now listen to me, James. God forbid something should go wrong because of your Elena Milligram. You must not have found a letter." James snickered dismissively and resentfully. "No, I haven't found her. She just won't be getting paid for the next 3 months, and she won't live with me. If you love her, let her come to you. I've done my job and the shame won't wash off you, and neither will Elena's." So James pulled out a knife and attacked Max with it. Luckily, Max wasn't too shy himself, so he grabbed the knife. He then stabbed James several times in the stomach. Eventually, the man died. A few days later in the hospital, Max was innocent. The investigators ruled self-defense, but this trial took a whole week. And during that time, there was trouble on the slipway. The thing is, Elena was grieving a lot when she found out about her lover's death. In those days, she had no time for mockery or anything else. She worked hard and often with some kind of irregularity. Max's deputy was in charge of the shipyard, a man who was absent-minded and uncaring. He turned a blind eye to all of Elena's irregularities, although the other slingers complained every day and more than once. Eventually, one day, Elena burst into tears in the crane cab. As always, she was pining for James. The crane was on its way to the harbor to install a part for the superstructure, which on a tanker res aft. In the end, Elena lost control of the situation. The crane went off the rails and collapsed into the harbor, right onto the water pollution control vessel. As a result of this accident, only Elena died. The vessel's crew of 4 people managed to jump overboard and were unharmed. Karma. Max fought happily when he learned of the death of his traitorous wife. True, for the loss of the expensive gantry crane, all the bumps fell on Max, and he had to resign. But this did not break him. He soon opened his own business and began to live even better than before. And eventually, he met a new wife, and life took on new colors. Dear listeners, your support is very important to us. If you like our story, please like, comment, and subscribe. It's very motivating for us. We need your feedback to improve our content.